Good, said Dumbledore. There is also the matter of the hippogriff. Buckbeak. Hagrid has been looking after him since Sirius died, but Buckbeak is yours now, so if you would prefer to make different arrangements. No, said Harry at once, he can stay with Hagrid. I think Buckbeak would prefer that. Hagrid will be delighted, said Dumbledore, smiling. He was thrilled to see Buckbeak again. Incidentally, we have decided, in the interests of Buckbeak's safety, to rechristen him Witherwings for the time being. Though I doubt that the Ministry would ever guess he is the hippogriff they once sentenced to death. Now, Harry, is your trunk packed? Doubtful that I would turn up, Dumbledore suggested shrewdly. I'll just go and, finish off, said Harry hastily, hurrying to pick up his fallen telescope and trainers. It took him a little over 10 minutes to track down everything he needed. At last he had managed to extract his invisibility cloak from under the bed, screwed the top back on his jar of color-change ink, and forced the lid of his trunk shut on his cauldron. Then, heaving his trunk in one hand and holding Hedwig's cage in the other, he made his way back downstairs. He was disappointed to discover that Dumbledore was not waiting in the hall, which meant that he had to return to the living room. Nobody was talking. Dumbledore was humming quietly, apparently quite at his ease, but the atmosphere was thicker than cold custard, and Harry did not dare look at the Dursleys as he said, Professor, I'm ready now. Good, said Dumbledore. Just one last thing, then. And he turned to speak to the Dursleys once more. As you will no doubt be aware, Harry comes of age in a year's time. No, said Aunt Petunia, speaking for the first time since Dumbledore's arrival. I'm sorry, said Dumbledore politely. No, he doesn't. He's a month younger than Dudley, and Duddus doesn't turn 18 until the year after next. Said Dumbledore pleasantly, but in the wizarding world, we come of age at 17. Uncle Vernoy muttered, preposterous, but Dumbledore ignored him. Now, as you already know, the wizard called Lord Voldemort was returned to this country. The wizarding community is currently in a state of open warfare. Harry, whom Lord Voldemort has already attempted to kill on a number of occasions, is in even greater danger now than the day when I left him upon your doorstep 15 years ago, with a letter explaining about his parents' murder and expressing the hope that you would care for him, though he were your own. Dumbledore paused, and although his voice remained light and calm, and he gave no obvious sign of anger, Harry felt a kind of chill emanating from him and noticed that the Dursleys drew very slightly closer together. You did not do as I asked. You have never treated Harry as a son. He has known nothing but neglect and often cruelty at your hands. The best that can be said is that he has at least escaped the appalling damage you have inflicted upon the unfortunate boy sitting between you. Both Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon looked around instinctively, as though expecting to see someone other than Dudley squeezed between them. Mr. Duddus. What do you? Began Uncle Vernon furiously, but Dumbledore raised his ringer for silence, a silence which fell as though he had struck Uncle Vernon dumb. The magic I evoked 15 years ago means that Harry has powerful protection while he can still call this house home. However miserable he has been here, however unwelcome, however badly treated, you have at least, grudgingly, allowed him house room. This magic will cease to operate the moment that Harry turns 17, in other words, at the moment he becomes a man. I ask only this, that you allow Harry to return, once more, to this house, before his 17th birthday, which will ensure that the protection continues until that time. None of the Dursleys said anything. Dudley was frowning slightly, as though he was still trying to work out when he had ever been mistreated. Uncle Vernon looked as though he had something stuck in his throat. Aunt Petunia, however, was oddly flushed. "Well, Harry, time for us to be off," said Dumbledore at last, standing up and straightening his long black cloak. "Until we meet again," he said to the Dursleys, who looked as though that moment could wait forever as far as they were concerned, and after doffing his hat, he swept from the room. "Bye," said Harry hastily to the Dursleys, and followed Dumbledore, who paused beside Harry's trunk, upon which Hedwig's cage was perched. "We do not want to be encumbered by these just now," he said, pulling out his wand again. "I shall send them to the burrow to await us there. However, I would like you to bring your invisibility cloak, just in case." Harry extracted his cloak from his trunk with some difficulty, trying not to show Dumbledore the mess within. When he had stuffed it into an inside pocket of his jacket, Dumbledore waved his wand and the trunk, cage, and Hedwig vanished. Dumbledore then waved his wand again, and the front door opened onto cool, misty darkness. "And now, Harry, let us step out into the night and pursue that flighty, temptress, adventure." Chapter 4, Horace Slughorn. Despite the fact that he had spent every waking moment of the past few days hoping desperately that Dumbledore would indeed come to fetch him, Harry felt distinctly awkward as they set off down Privet Drive together. He had never had a proper conversation with the headmaster outside of Hogwarts before. There was usually a desk between them. The memory of their last face-to-face encounter kept intruding too, and it rather heightened Harry's sense of embarrassment. He had shouted a lot on that occasion, not to mention done his best to smash several of Dumbledore's most prized possessions. Dumbledore, however, seemed completely relaxed. "Keep your wand at the ready, Harry," he said brightly. "But I thought I'm not allowed to use magic outside school, sir." "If there is an attack," said Dumbledore, "I give you permission to use any counterjinx or curse that might occur to you. However, I do not think you need worry about being attacked tonight." "Why not, sir?" "You are with me," said Dumbledore simply. "This will do, Harry." He came to an abrupt halt at the end of Privet Drive. "You have not, of course, passed your apparition test," he said. "No," said Harry. "I thought you had to be 17. "You do," said Dumbledore. "So you will need to hold on to my arm very tightly. My left, if you don't mind. As you have noticed, my wand arm is a little fragile at the moment." Harry gripped Dumbledore's proffered forearm. "Very good," said Dumbledore. "Well, here we go." Harry felt Dumbledore's arm twist away from him and redoubled his grip. The next thing he knew, everything went black. He was being pressed very hard from all directions. He could not breathe. There were iron bands tightening around his chest. His eyeballs were being forced back into his head. His eardrums were being pushed deeper into his skull, and then He gulped great lungfuls of cold night air and opened his streaming eyes. He felt as though he had just been forced through a very tight rubber tube. It was a few seconds before he realized that Privet Drive had vanished. He and Dumbledore were now standing in what appeared to be a deserted village square, in the center of which stood an old war memorial and a few benches. His comprehension catching up with his senses, Harry realized that he had just apparated for the first time in his life. "Are you all right?" asked Dumbledore, looking down at him solicitously. "The sensation does take some getting used to." "I'm fine," said Harry, rubbing his ears, which felt as though they had left Privet Drive rather reluctantly. "But I think I might prefer brooms." Dumbledore smiled, drew his traveling cloak a little more lightly around his neck, and said, "This way." He set off at a brisk pace, past an empty inn and a few houses. According to a clock on a nearby church, it was almost midnight. "So tell me," Harry said Dumbledore. "Your scar, has it been hurting at all?" Harry raised a hand unconsciously to his forehead and rubbed a lightning-shaped mark. "No," he said, "and I've been wondering about that. I thought it would be burning all the time now Voldemort's getting so powerful again." He glanced up at Dumbledore and saw that he was wearing a satisfied expression. "I, on the other hand, thought otherwise," said Dumbledore. "Lord Voldemort has finally realized the dangerous access to his thoughts and feelings you have been enjoying. It appears that he is now employing occlumency against you." "Well, I'm not complaining," said Harry, who missed neither the disturbing dreams nor the startling flashes of insight into Voldemort's mind. They turned a corner, passing a telephone box and a bus shelter. Harry looked sideways at Dumbledore again. "Professor." "Harry." Where exactly are we?" "This, Harry, is the charming village of Budleigh Babberton." "And what are we doing here?" "Ah yes, of course, I haven't told you," said Dumbledore. "Well, I have lost count of the number of times I have said this in recent years, but we are once again one member of staff short. We are here to persuade an old colleague of mine to come out of retirement and return to Hogwarts." "How can I help with that, sir?" "Oh, I think we'll find a use for you," said Dumbledore vaguely. "Left here, Harry." They proceeded up a steep, narrow street lined with houses. All the windows were dark. The odd chill that had lain over Privet Drive for 2 weeks persisted here too. Thinking of Dementus, Harry cast a look over his shoulder and grasped his wand reassuringly in his pocket. "Professor, why couldn't we just apparate directly into your old colleague's house?"